Okay. Al pasuk v'nosnar tivul on the pasuk that the earth will give its produce. Doshra Zalbator's Koyanim. In this week's parsha, it says that if you will go in my statutes for them, the earth will give its produce, etc. So it says in the Torah's Koyanim, that's a type of medrash on parsha on the Chumash Vayikra, like derech shaya oisa achshav, that the way it will give its produce will not be in the way it does it now, but rather it will give forth its produce in the way that it did in the times of Adam. How do we know that the earth in the future will be sown and planted and give forth its fruits and its produce in the very day that it was planted? Talmud Loimar, we learned in the pasuk Zecher Asan of Loisov, he made a memory for his wonders, V'keinu Omer Tachiar Deshe, that the earth will give forth a covering of grass, Esav, Malamed Sheboy Bayom Shahoisen Izras Boy Bayom Oisapedus. From this the Chacham derived that the very day that was planted, the very day it would give forth its produce, and when it says the tree of the field will give forth its fruit, like in other words, what it says in our parsha that the tree of the field will give forth its fruit is not the way it's now, that it takes time until it grows, but rather in the ways that it did in the times of Adam Edition, in the very same day that the tree was planted, in the very same day it gave forth its fruit. So earlier he spoke about the produce from the earth, like wheat and so on and so forth, and grass, etc. And now he's going to talk about the fruit trees. How do we also know that the tree itself in the future when Moshiach comes will be eaten? It says that it's tree fruit. If it comes to teach you that the trees were fruit-bearing trees, it already says it will give forth fruit. Why does it say the fruit and tree together in Chumash Bereshis, where it talks about how Hashem created the fruit trees? Just like the fruit is eaten, the same thing, the tree would also be able to be eaten. And how do we know that even barren trees will give forth fruit? Even trees of the field, in other words, they're not fruit trees, they're only trees of the field, will also give forth its fruit. Okay, so we learned about all different types of miraculous things that will take place when Moshiach comes, and the Rebbe is going to bring other places where it talks about the miracles that will take place when Moshiach comes. This idea, this content that we just now discussed, the wondrous miracles and qualities that will be in the future in the physicality of the world. We find in the words of Chazal in many places. For example, in the Gemara Ksubas, in the future, Yisrael will give forth delicious treats and garments of silk. In the future, a wheat stalk will go up as tall as a palm tree and it will rise up at the top of mountains. In the future, wheat kernels will be like the two kidneys of a large ox. So these are all descriptions of over-the-top types of miracles that will be when Mashiach comes. Top of the second column. We did understand concerning describing the state of Mashiach's times. The Rambam wrote, the entire involvement of the world will only be to know Hashem. Therefore, Yidden will be great sages and scholars. They will know hidden matters. They will comprehend and grasp the mind of the Creator as much as it's humanly possible for a person to do so. Like it says, that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem like waters cover the ocean. Move on, it's understood that when Yidden will be in such a lofty state of spiritual awareness of Hashem and knowledge of Hashem, there is no import and value to these types of physical miracles and wonders. Will be in the produce and the fruits of the land. Like the Rambam himself expresses this, that all the pleasurable things will be as available as dust. So therefore, like the Rebbe is going to pose the question, so what significance and why is this important for us? Though it's understood that there is a benefit from having all these things. When the good is very much in abundance. So then this is a tool and a medium. They'll be free to study Torah and its wisdom. And there will not be any oppressors and anything that will stop them from learning, because they will be completely taken care of in their material needs, so they could study Torah and do mitzvahs and do everything appropriately. So despite the fact that there is definitely a benefit to be had from all these great and wondrous miracles of the great physical good that will be when Moshiach comes, because that will enable us and that will be a means and a tool for being able to pursue more divine pursuits. Still in all, the Rebbe asks, why did the Chazal speak at such great length in the pleasurable physical things that will be when Mashiach comes, as if it's something unique and special in its own right, not just as a medium for being able to study more Torah and do more mitzvahs. If it is only as a medium to study more Torah and do mitzvahs, the Chazal don't have to speak at such great length about all the wondrous things that will happen then. All the Chazal should say is, we will have no worries whatsoever. We'll be completely taken care of. All necessary things and even beyond what's necessary will be supplied to us, and therefore we'll be able to sit and learn Torah. Why make such a big deal about the miracles that will happen when Mashiach comes, as if they have value in and of themselves? And the Rebbe is going to point out at the end of the Sicha that the physical benefits is actually expressing something very spiritual and high. Ois Beis, last paragraph on the page. Similar to this question, the different commentaries asked concerning the reward of the mitzvahs, that's explained in this week's parsha, the second of the two parshas, Bechukosai. If you will go on my laws and you will observe my mitzvahs and you will do them, and I will give you the rains. And the pasuk speaks in the details of the rewards of the mitzvahs. The majority of what the pasuk talks about are physical matters. But iker shleimus haschar hu te'elas v'toiva ruchni is seemingly the primary perfection of the reward is a spiritual benefit and good. That is the true good, and the true benefit is the spiritual more than the physical. In the different commentaries, they explained Lefidas Rambam, according to what we explained previously of the Rambam. Shekol Elo Yudim Shu Parsha. All these things are foretold in our parsha. Einon Ikar Askar. This is not the primary reward. And all the benefits and goodness that's mentioned in this parsha. It's only speaking about removing any obstacles and any difficulties, anything that will prevent us from doing Torah mitzvahs. What does it mean to say? If you will observe my mitzvahs, I will remove from you, Hashem says, all types of obstacles and difficulties. Kimmel Chametz, I will remove from you wars, v'chaloyim, and illnesses, v'rav, and hunger and famine, v'yogin, and mourning, ba'oifen shetuchal lavetz Hashem b'shum b'loy shum meineya. In such a manner, you'll be able to serve Hashem without any types of things that will block and prevent you from doing so. The Mefarshim explain the primary reward of the world to come, Eine Nisker Kan, is not mentioned over here in our parsha. Why is it not mentioned? Kedei sheyavid es boiri lishmoi, so that a yid should serve his maker for Hashem's sake. V'loi machmas aschar hahu amiras oynish, not because of that upcoming reward or from the fear of punishment. That's not what Hashem wants us how to serve Him. That is one approach based on the Rambam. But according to the opinion of many Mefarshim, in this parsha, it's not just referring to things that Hashem will remove obstacles from our way of fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. It's actually speaking about the reward for fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. We could say that the reason that the reward that's explained in this pasuk is primarily when it comes to physical things that are being foretold, moving behegdim. Will be understood by first prefacing the explanation, the question, why did the pasuk speak at length in describing the reward of Torah study and fulfillment of mitzvahs? Especially the ultimate service is a service for the sake of Hashem, for the sake of Torah mitzvahs. Like we have in Pirkei Avos, do not be like servants that serve the master for the sake of receiving reward. Be like servants that serve their master not for the sake of receiving reward. So therefore, why is it such a big deal made in our parsha about the reward? Last line in the first column, Ella, but rather lefisha avoida zu avoida gedolam, but rather because the avoida of serving Hashem, not for the sake of reward, top of the second column, is a very great service. It's a very high level of service. Which Kosva Rambam, like the Rambam wrote, this quality of serving Hashem just for Hashem's sake, lishma, is a very high level. Not every wise person merits to serve Hashem just for the altruistic reason of just serving Hashem. Therefore, the beginning of our service has to be in a way of not doing it for the sake of Hashem, but doing it for our own benefit. A person should always be involved in Torah mitzvahs, even though it's not for the sake of the mitzvah itself. The Rambam says, therefore, therefore, when we teach the children and women and generally people of the land, we do not teach them only to serve out of fear and also to receive reward until their mind increases and they appreciate the value of Torah mitzvahs on its own. Since the Torah speaks concerning the majority, and Torah studying fulfillment of mitzvahs of the majority of Yidden is not in such an altruistic way that they are not interested in receiving a reward. Therefore, Torah had to mention explicitly the reward for the involvement of Torah mitzvahs and speak so at length. Just like it's concerning the reward in general, so too it's concerning the content of the reward. Since the majority of Yidden in this level are in general, they do not have a desire for spiritual promises and spiritual reward. Hashem is talking to Yidden that the majority of Yidden should be able to relate to it. and the majority of Yidden relate to physical reward. So therefore, just like it even speaks about reward when really they should just be wanting to do Torah mitzvahs for its own sake, but since not most people are not holding by that level, the same thing, most people are not holding by a level to appreciate the spiritual reward of Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, in Torah, it was said explicitly, primarily the physical reward and physical promises. When it comes to physical reward, every person has a comprehension of this and understands this. This will encourage them more for the study of Torah and fulfillment of mitzvahs. So just like when the Torah speaks about that concerning the present in Bechukosai, so the same idea we would apply concerning Moshiach's times. Last paragraph on the page, in the similar vein, we could explain concerning the future. That the Chazal speak in great wonder and go over the top in explaining about the physical miracles and the physical wonders that will be then, like we mentioned at the beginning of the Sicha, because Gam Lasid Love Yagil Kolechad Ve'echad El Takev Lasogan Nailas B'Schar Ruchnis. Not everyone will reach immediately to a greater comprehension and appreciation of the spiritual reward. And it's obvious not everybody will attain immediately the avoid of doing things for Hashem's sake, avoid the ma'ava, a service out of love. Even though when Mashiach comes, there will be an order to the ascent that will go from strength to strength. A person will not be immediately born with a perfect level of the knowledge and comprehension of Hashem and serving Hashem out of love. And therefore there's a need in physical miracles and physical wonders to be able to make him speed up and encourage him for the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. That is the approach that the Rebbe first applies. But the Rebbe is going to say it's still a little bit difficult. So he says in Reis Gimel, seemingly this explanation is still a little bit difficult to say. Shari Parshas Bechukosai, the Parsha, this week's Parsha Bechukosai, V'chein kol Parshas b'Torah shebem this Parsha avtach al schar mitzvahs, and so too all the Parshas in Torah that over there was explained the promise for the reward of mitzvahs. Namru l'chol Yisrael, were told to all Yidden. Gam la'elu shem bedargin nailas v'avoyos Hashem, also those are on an elevated level in the service of Hashem. Ulefian al nimtza, and according to the above comes out sheparsha zu eina sheyachas la'elu sheyesh l'masaga b'schar ruchnis, that this parsha is not applicable to those that have some appreciation of spiritual reward. Upshita shaloi la'elu shavidosim shloi l'asa kalva prat, and it's obvious that they wouldn't have any meaning to those that they serve Hashem not for the sake of receiving rewards. In other words, there are different tiers of people. There are people that have an appreciation of a spiritual reward, and then there are people that are not even interested in a reward. So therefore, the entire parsha in our week's Torah portion, and everywhere else in the Torah where it speaks about physical rewards, it's only it's only addressing those that their comprehension is in physical good. And only the physical good and the physical benefits and the physical rewards will encourage them for doing Torah mitzvahs. So it comes out that there's a whole segment of the Jewish population that this part of the Torah is not talking to them. So you can answer, listen, we have a rule, the Torah speaks to the majority. You can't speak about outliers and exceptions. The Torah has to speak to the majority of Yidden. It's impossible for the Torah to address every single person in their unique manner. Though in general the Torah speaks to the majority, but still in all, it makes more sense to explain in such a manner that the physical promises and the physical rewards that we're talking about over here is something that's applicable to all Yidden. and is something that even someone that is not interested in reward, and even someone that has an appreciation of spiritual reward, still has a certain message, a certain idea which is communicated via knowledge that there will be physical abundance when Moshiach comes. In addition to that, in addition to the fact it's more comfortable to be inclusive in what the Torah is saying, for sure there's some type of teaching even to the minority. You cannot say Torah is literally for every single Yid. There must be something that even the minority of Yidden that do appreciate spirituality and do serve Hashem out of love and not for the sake of reward, have something that they can derive from that. In addition to this, in explaining the pasuk, if you will go in my chukim and you will observe my mitzvahs and you will do them, Pirush Razal the Chazal explained, Pirush Rashi told to brought down in Rashi's explanation, the Hainu liyos amelim b'Torah. What is this Bechukosai telechu? Rashi specifically says, the Chazal specifically say that you should toil in Torah. Not only that, that the toil in Torah is for the sake of observance and to fulfill. That's why it says, and then that you observe the mitzvahs and you will do them. So it's one continuation. The toiling in Torah is for the sake of the observance of mitzvahs. The Nimtza, top of the second column, comes out. The primary meaning of this pasuk is talking about an involvement in Torah mitzvahs beyond the norm. We're talking about a higher level of Torah study and fulfillment of mitzvahs. Limud metech amal, a study out of toil, v'chein shmira v'kiyum metech amal, and also observance and fulfillment of mitzvahs out of toil. So therefore, again, if we're dealing with someone on that stage, it seems incongruous to go ahead and deal with physical rewards. The Rebbe goes on, especially according to what's explained in Sfarim, in the meaning of the word Bechukosai, according to the esoteric meaning, etc. Shumel shoin chakika. The word chukah and bechukosai is from the word engraving. V'hainu shalimud atoyra v'kiyum hamitzvos kan hu loyrak b'ofen shel amal v'yagia stam. This means that this Torah study and fulfillment of mitzvahs over here is not just in a way of toiling and just putting in a lot of effort, ela b'ofen shachakika, in a way that's engraved and chiseled into him. That the Torah mitzvahs are engraved in his heart and his entire being. Like the advantage of engraved letters over written letters. Not only are engraved letters joined in a more powerful way with the stone in which it is engraved than if the letters that are written, that how much the letters are written are joined with a parchment that's written. It's incomparable. The letters that are engraved have a lot more joined, but rather even more so, el she'ein kam metzias milvad ha'evan sheba chakukas ha'oisius. When we're talking about engraved letters, all there is just the stone which it's engraved in. When you're dealing with ink written on parchment, so there's two separate items that are joined over here. There's the parchment and there's the ink. Two separate products. They come from two separate sources. The parchment comes from the hide of an animal. The ink comes from different herbs, etc., etc. And you're taking these two separate items and you're joining them together. But when you're talking about letters engraved on a stone, there's no separate item from the stone. The letters are of the stone themselves. What does that mean spiritually? Torah study that's hinted over here. It's not just in such a manner that the person with the Torah are like two items that are joined together, like ink and parchment are two separate items that are joined together. that the person is not an entity in existence. V'chol mitziyusai hi ha-Torah shaloimed, his entire being and existence is the Torah that he's studying. That's what it means when the letters are engraved in the stone. There is nothing else except for the stone. We'll move on. It's understood. If we're talking about a person that's learning Torah on such a level, by such a person that his Torah study is in a way of engraving, so also the mitzvahs that he fulfills is also in such a manner. It permeates his entire being. So if the Torah permeates his entire being, moving from all this is understood. We're talking about a great and elevated level of Torah study and fulfillment of mitzvahs. Therefore it's obvious a person of that level where the Torah is his entire being, obviously nothing other than Torah and mitzvahs matter to him. And it's obvious that reward doesn't matter to him, and physical promises doesn't matter to him. And therefore, why are you talking, how is it possible that a person in such a level in the service of Hashem, we tell him, because you will be going in my chukim, and you will observe my mitzvahs, and you will do them, then you will receive a reward. I will give you rains at our times, and all the physical promises concerning bodily and material things. There is no logical connection between the two. So the Rebbe is going to explain here in the Sichos that really the whole idea of the physical abundance is actually an expression of spiritual manifestation, and that's why it is connected and is foretold as a reward for the highest, most levels of learning Torah. So he says on the top of the page, Daled, we say the explanation of this. Concerning the Torah, it says, the Torah is your life and the length of your days. So the Rebbe explains a very interesting thing. And its meaning is, not just does the Torah bring life to the person in this world and the world to come, it is the very life of every single Yid. This means that the Torah is the very life of every single Yid. When it comes to a Jewish person, Torah is not something additional to his being, and it's just another part of his many aspects of his life. He has his family, and he has his food, and he has his job, and he has the Torah. No, it's when we say Hu Chayecha, the Torah itself is your life. That means that is who he is. That's his very being. A person is divided into many parts. In general, that he's divided into Rosh, Guf, Regel, the head, the trunk, and the foot. The head is a place where his higher powers reside, the intellect, etc. So to the senses of seeing and hearing, sight and hearing. And the trunk, the body, is the vessel and the residence for his emotions, etc. When it comes to the feet, there is only the power of walking, that's the lowest power. By miles of Adam, and walking, you don't recognize it's the difference and the quality and the advantage of a human being. Animals also walk, birds also walk, insects walk. All of these differences are concerning the individual powers of a person, the intellect, the emotions, the power of movement, and so on. The very essence of his soul, life, that's higher than the individual powers of intellect and emotions and so on. Nimtza b'chol haguf v'shavim harosh v'ragli is found throughout the body equally, from head to foot. You don't say that the head is more alive than the foot, or the foot is less alive than the head. The pinky of a person's foot is just as much alive as the brain and the head, because the essence of the life force is all over. Top of the second column on this page, the reason for this is because the life force and vitality of the person, that is the very being of the person. That's why it's found in every single point of the body equally. Similar to the story in the Gemara concerning the power of delight of the soul, that the delight and enjoyment and pleasure of the soul also is something that encompasses the entire body, similar to, not exactly like the very life force of the soul. It also affects on and in the heel of the foot. Good news fattens the bone, like the story over there with Vespasian when he heard the good news about him becoming the Roman emperor. He couldn't take one shoe off, he couldn't put one shoe on because his actual bone in his foot grew and fattened. Because the light is from the very being and essence of the soul. Therefore it's found and affected the entire person, even to its heel. Even more so, what is the proof? What is the gauge and the test? If a particular matter, its source is the life force, that's the very essence of the person. It's from the fact if it comes revealed not just in his higher and elevated powers, even to the lowest powers, even to the heel of the foot. In other words, how do you determine if something is essential and part of his very makeup? You'll see, where does it touch? Does it only touch his head, or does it reach even down to the lowest part of his foot? The Rebbe brings an example that's similar to this. He says, "Me'ein dugma davar," a bit of an example of this. Adam hamizboinu medavar maybe they simcha, a person that thinks into a matter that brings him to joy. What is the proof that the joy totally permeated his entire being, and he's truly happy? When the joy expresses itself, not just in his thought, and not just in his speech, but also in his action, until dancing with his legs. So therefore, that's when you know that the simcha is really part of who he is, because he is all over his body. There's no distinction between the he that's in his head or the he that's in his foot. So too in all the other emotions like love and awe, or suffering, etc. If it only pains him in one place versus it pains him entirely if he feels the love and expresses the love in every part of his body, not just in one part. From this is also understood concerning the fact that the Torah is our life. The revelation and the expression of the fact that the Torah is the life force and vitality in the entire being of the person. When the Torah influences and affects not just matters of a soul, in yonim ruchnim and nailim, spiritual and elevated matters, elagam bin yonim gufnim, the Torah influences also bodily matters. And all the material and physical things are connected with him. Now we're going to bring it back to the reward. If the reward for Torah, for its own sake, would only be that it will merit spiritual levels and elevated matters, there's not a complete and full expression that the Torah is an entire being. Reward is like a natural consequence and result of his involvement in Torah. Therefore, who schar ruchni, therefore it's a spiritual reward, tmuras avidosei ruchnis, in payment for his spiritual service. Avol top next page, avol kasher nishpoim like toivis gashmis beglal avidosei ruchnis betoira mitzvahs. But when physical good comes down to him because of a spiritual avoidant Torah mitzvahs, and I will give you rains in its time, and the tree of the field will give its fruit. That it's visible, recognizable, that the Torah mitzvahs is some additional study and action. There are something addition to who he is, or a detail in his being. Rather, the Torah is his entire being and his entire life force. Therefore, the involvement in Torah brings goodness and benefit, and all of his matters, also in the physical matters of this world. So it's not that physical reward is somehow less. Physical reward is the gauge and the expression of how powerfully Torah permeated the world and permeated the person. The cause of the fact, the reason for the fact that the Torah is the life force and the very being of the person, because Torah and Hashem are entirely one. Therefore, just like Hashem is the true existence, from his true existence, all beings came into being. From Hashem came about all qualities and all types of perfection and good. That's the entire creation. The similar vein is in Torah that's connected with Hashem. That Torah will be the source for all the good in creation. Torah brings good and benefit in all existences. All types of benefit. Both spiritual and physical benefit. Just like Hashem is the source for all physical and spiritual benefit, and all physical and spiritual perfection, so Torah, which is one with Hashem, becomes as well the source not just of spiritual benefit, but also of physical benefit. Valpiz and Nimtza, the Rebbe concludes, according to this comes out, Sha'adrab, not the way we said before, that the physical rewards are also something, but the main thing is the spiritual rewards. Just the opposite. Specifically in physical reward, Mudgish is emphasized that Torah is in the way of Bechukosai from the word meaning engraving. The Torah is engraved in him till it becomes mamish who he is. Therefore it permeates every part of his existence, including the physicality of his existence, including his physical rewards and needs. I say now he's going to bring this to Moshiach's times as well, and the rewards that we will receive when Moshiach comes. According to the above will be explained also the connection between the physical promises that's in the Psukim and Mamar Chazal concerning the future time. Like the above mentioned statements of the Chazal, that the very day that it's planted, that very day it will give forth fruit. In the future, Eretz Yisrael will give forth tasty things and silk garments. What's the big deal about these things? Specifically, these physical rewards, over the top physical rewards, is an indication of the perfection of the state of the Yidden and Torah study in their fulfillment of mitzvahs. The fact that at present matters of a person has to come about, his physical needs come about in the way of burdens, difficulties, and toil. And it takes a lot of time until the earth gives forth fruit. Whether it's herbs and grasses, and whether it's fruits of the tree. It's not just because of the sin of the tree of knowledge that the entire world descended. That the earth is now cursed on your behalf, with great difficulty, with sadness, and you will eat from its fruit. By the sweat of your face, you will eat bread, etc. On a deeper level, it's because the physical matters are not vessels for the Hashpah of Hashem. This means that also a person that studies Torah and fulfills mitzvahs the way it's supposed to be, and it comes down to him all good things, also in his physical needs. This doesn't come immediately to him. Because his physical matters are not joined with the root in the spiritual, the Hashpah of Hashem. There's like a disconnect. There's like a separation. So there's a delay between Hashem's brachas coming down here and the what he accomplished with his Torah mitzvahs above. This is the uniqueness and novelty and greatness that will be in the future when Moshiach comes. There won't be any separation between the action, in other words, like planting in the earth, to the physical growth. Because in the future, the physical matters will be joined with the root and the source, the word of Hashem. How about the difference? There's the way this reward is now when a person does the Torah mitzvahs in a way of chakika, and the unity that takes place, that chakika indicates, engraving indicates that unity, versus that chakika and that unity and that joining and immediacy that will be when Mashiach comes. Moving up in Mashal Machiluk ben chika al gabi ha'evan v'chakika shi me'ever la'ever. There's a difference when you engrave words upon a stone, but there's still, the back of the letters are still the stone itself. Versus you could have engraving that's through and through, like it says by the luchas, for example, that were given from Hashem. The letters were engraved through and through. Like it's explained the difference between them. For example, if you have letters that are engraved on a precious stone, though the letters are part of the stone itself, not like writing on a parchment where the ink and the parchment are two separate entities. Still in all, since these letters have a place that they are like grasping and held onto the stone, they have still some type of connection and association with the letters that are being written. It says that when the letters are engraved on a precious stone, they are still concealing a little bit of the luminous nature of the stone. Heim mashchirim hatoyhar shala eventov. They darken the clarity and the brilliance of the precious stone. V'ilu oisach kukas ma'ever la'ever k'maya'oif shabeluchas, as opposed to the letters are engraved through and through, like the letters in the luchais. They not have any room to be held on to. They're totally separated from the letters that are totally not separated, totally different than letters that are written. So when you look, let's say, if you had, let's say, a brilliant stone, and you would engrave something into a brilliant stone, but you wouldn't engrave it through and through. So because of the way the light doesn't hit the areas that are deep in the engraved letters, so what you're going to have is that these stones are being lessened, their brilliance, because of the engraved letters. But when you have a letter that's engraved through and through, so there's no place that's like distant or something that causes now that it's darkened and so on. So when you talk about letters that are engraved through and through in the stone, these are completely different than written letters. Based on these two types of engraving, we're going to explain the difference about the reward of engraving the Torah mitzvahs within the person nowadays versus the engraved Torah mitzvahs when Moshiach comes. So too, it's also in the metaphor. When a particular matter is engraved in the person, similar to the letters that are engraved in the precious stone, that it's engraved and it's permeated within it, not like written letters that are not in it, but it's on it, on the parchment. It doesn't actually permeate the very essence of the stone because it's not through and through. There's still the back of the stone where it's not yet permeated. Just like by the person, it's not his very essence. So it's in the result that it doesn't completely permeate all his external matters because his Torah did not totally through and through permeate him. When the Torah mitzvahs are permeating the person from through and through, this is an entire essence becomes the Torah mitzvahs. So it permeates and affects through and through in all his powers and matters until all the matters in the world. Therefore, it's visible and revealed also in the physicality of the world. There's no separation whatsoever between when the person plants and the fruits that grow and sprout. Take it from Yad Mamish B'liefse Klal, that the flow and effect of Hashem comes immediately without any separation whatsoever. The Inyan Zeh Begilui Lasud Lavi, this matter will come out revealed in the future. Then it will be openly revealed, the engraving of the luchas, like it says, engraved al the luchas. The Chazal say, do not say engraved, but say charus could be also read as cherus, freedom. Cherus malchamovus, it's freedom from the angel of death. This freedom will be when Mashiach comes. The Geulah mitzvah shlema de Mashiach tzedkenu, in the true and complete redemption through Mashiach. Speedily in our days, Mama.